Don't get too comfortable at this table. People like you don't belong here." The words cut through the music like a knife. The chatter fell quiet. Heads turned. The air shifted. And then came the laugh, high-pitched, sharp, meant to sting. The heiress, draped in a dress the color of fire, leaned over her chair with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. A crystal glass glittered in her hand. Without hesitation, she tipped it. A stream of red wine cascaded down like a waterfall, catching the golden light of the chandelier before soaking into the hair of the woman seated below. It flowed across her scalp, dripping past her temples, tracing down her jaw, streaking her orange dress in dark stains. The sound of liquid hitting fabric was louder than it should have been, louder because the room itself had gone silent. Gasps burst here and there. A few muffled laughs tried to break through. Phones rose instantly, cameras hungry for scandal. A businessman's wife covered her mouth, horrified. A group of young men in tailored suits leaned back in their chairs, grinning, as if they had just been treated to entertainment money couldn't buy. The heiress threw back her head and laughed again, triumphant, basking in the attention. "There, that's better. Orange was never your color. Red suits you more." Her voice carried like a trumpet, arrogant and cutting. She dangled the empty glass for all to see, tilting it as though it were a trophy. Some guests laughed on cue. Others clapped politely. Everyone understood the message. This was dominance. But the woman in orange, the black CEO, did not move. She did not flinch. She did not wipe the wine dripping into her collar. She simply sat still, letting it run. Her hands remained on the table, perfectly composed, as if frozen in calm defiance. Her eyes lifted. It was not a hurried glance, not a desperate plea. It was slow, deliberate, calculated. Her gaze locked onto the heiress with such quiet force that the laughter in the room began to falter. One by one, voices died down, chuckles strangled mid-breath. The ripple of noise collapsed into silence again. The heiress shifted slightly, her smirk stiffening, but she forced another giggle out, tossing her hair, playing for the crowd. "Come on, don't be shy. Smile for the cameras," she taunted, gesturing at the glowing phones aimed at the table. Yet even she could feel the current turning. The spectacle was no longer hers. The soaked woman did not need words. Her stillness was heavier than shouting, heavier than outrage. Every drop that fell from her chin to the linen was an unspoken declaration. Every second of silence built a pressure the heiress could not laugh away. The hall itself seemed to bend around her composure. The chandelier sparkled above, but the spotlight had shifted. The one dripping with wine was no longer the object of ridicule. She was becoming something else, something unshakable, a center of gravity that every gaze now circled. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The hush didn't last. Whispers began to coil through the room like smoke. One woman leaned toward her husband, her diamonds catching the light as she muttered behind her hand, "Did you see that? She just sat there." Another man chuckled low, shaking his head. "She won't last 5 minutes in this circle. Not like that." But not all whispers carried scorn. From the far end of the table, a guest frowned, eyes narrowing at the heiress in red. A quiet murmur reached his neighbor. "Too far. That was too far." His words barely rose above the sound of a phone camera shutter. The phones, oh, they were everywhere. A half-dozen angles captured the wine still dripping from the CEO's dress, each frame already destined for feeds and stories before the night was over. Some held their screens high, faces glowing with the thrill of gossip. Others tried to record discreetly, pretending to sip champagne while their lenses burned the humiliation into memory. And then came the laughter, scattered first, then rolling like a tide. A group of young men, heirs to fortunes they didn't earn, clapped one another on the shoulders. One of them, eyes bright with cruelty, leaned over to his friend. She should be grateful. That wine cost more than her entire outfit. Their laughter was loud, harsh, meant to fill the silence left by the CEO's refusal to respond. A woman in pearls smirked as she adjusted her napkin. "She doesn't belong here. Look at her. She can't even defend herself." The heiress, hearing these murmurs, lifted her empty glass once more as if conducting the orchestra of derision. She curtsied mockingly toward the still figure in orange, basking in the wave of validation. "Cheers to outsiders," she announced. More laughter, more applause, more clinking of glasses. Yet beneath the noise, tension stirred. Not everyone was laughing. A pair of investors whispered behind their menus, concern etched on their faces. "She's the partner, isn't she? The contract this morning?" Another nodded grimly, eyes darting toward the woman drenched in wine. Their amusement soured into worry. They knew what was at stake, even if the heiress did not. Meanwhile, the CEO remained motionless. She did not wipe the liquid pooling at her collarbone. She did not rise to defend herself. Her silence became its own performance, a mirror in which every cruel voice was forced to hear itself echo. The louder the crowd jeered, the more her composure magnified their ugliness. One young guest lowered his phone, suddenly uncomfortable. He slipped it into his pocket and stared at his glass instead. A woman beside him frowned, her laughter faltering as she watched the still figure, wine-soaked but unbroken. Something about the scene no longer felt amusing. It felt dangerous, as if the room itself was waiting for the inevitable turn. The heiress, oblivious, blew a kiss toward the audience of cameras. "Remember this night," she shouted, spinning theatrically in her red dress. "This is what happens when you sit where you don't belong." Her laughter burst again, high and wild, filling every corner of the gilded hall. But in the quiet space beneath that laughter and the pause between the gasps and the claps, eyes began to shift. The balance was changing. Not everyone was laughing anymore. Not everyone was blind to what was about to come. And at the center of it all, wine dripping steadily to the marble floor, the black CEO waited. Her gaze never wavered. Wine dripped down her temple, slid past her cheek, and disappeared into the folds of her dress. Still she sat, back straight, hands resting lightly on the table as if nothing had happened. Around her, the room hummed with nervous energy laughter that was too loud, whispers that were too sharp, the clinking of glasses used to mask unease. But when her eyes lifted, the noise dimmed. She looked first at the glass in the heiress's hand, now empty, held like a weapon-turned trophy. Then she raised her gaze higher, settling on the woman in red. The smirk on the heiress's lips faltered. It was only for a second, a flicker, but in that moment the crowd caught it. The CEO's stare was deliberate, unhurried, piercing. She didn't need to speak. The silence wrapped around her like armor, and the weight of it pressed into the room. Her composure became the loudest thing in the hall. A ripple of discomfort spread. One guest shifted in his chair, suddenly aware of how loud his laughter had sounded a moment ago. Another lowered her phone, ashamed to be caught recording. The cameras still pointed, but their owners were no longer certain they wanted proof of what they were witnessing. The heiress tossed her hair, forcing a brittle laugh. "What? No comeback? No words?" she sneered, but her voice cracked slightly at the edges. She leaned closer, waving her glass in mock triumph. "You should thank me. No stylist could ever make you stand out like this." Her cruelty met only silence. And then, slowly, the CEO blinked. One measured blink, her lashes heavy with wine, before her eyes opened again, calm, cold, unflinching. It was the look of someone who had already decided, someone who held the power to end this entire charade with a thought. The heiress felt it. She took a step back, just a half step, but it was enough. Those watching noticed. Murmurs stirred. "Did you see that? She's not even angry," someone whispered. Another voice replied, uneasy. "No, she's waiting." "Oh." The CEO adjusted her posture slightly, straightening in her chair. She lifted one hand, not to wipe the wine, but to place it gently on the stem of her own glass, her fingers curling around it with quiet certainty. The movement was small, but it commanded attention. Her gaze never left the heiress. She let the silence stretch, a silence thick enough to drown the mocking giggles that tried to spark back to life. The crowd leaned in without realizing, drawn by the gravity of her stillness. And in that charged pause, something shifted. The spectacle no longer belonged to the woman in red. The spotlight had moved. Every eye was on the drenched figure at the table, not as a victim, but as the calm center of a storm no one else could see coming. The heiress forced another laugh, too loud, too hollow. She waved to the crowd as if to reclaim their attention, but her eyes flicked nervously back to the woman she had tried to humiliate. And what she saw staring back at her was not weakness. It was warning. The banquet hall buzzed with tension. Guests leaned closer to one another, voices lowered, unease spreading like cracks across glass. The wine kept dripping, The silence kept deepening. And at the center of it all, the black CEO's eyes told a story no one else dared to speak aloud. This isn't over. The heiress shifted her weight, heels clicking softly against the marble as she tried to reclaim the rhythm of the room. Her smile widened, brittle at the edges, the kind of grin that dared the crowd to laugh with her or risk standing against her. She twirled the empty glass in her fingers and let it dangle carelessly at her side. "Oops," she announced, voice dripping with mock innocence. "Guess I got carried away, but come on, look at her. She actually looks better this way, don't you think?" She gestured toward the woman in orange, still seated, still silent, still dripping wine like a statue carved from resolve. A few obedient chuckles followed. A smattering of applause rose from her loyal circle, desperate to keep her ego intact. One man even clapped too loudly, his laugh bouncing around the hall like broken glass. But beyond that shallow ring of supporters, the atmosphere wavered. Guests exchanged wary looks. A woman covered her discomfort with a sip of champagne. An older gentleman adjusted his cufflinks, staring at the tablecloth rather than the spectacle before him. The heiress tilted her head back, basking in what she mistook for admiration. She raised her chin, her red dress catching the light, diamonds at her ears flashing with every exaggerated gesture. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty had curdled into something sharp and arrogant. She strutted around the chair like a performer on stage, her heels tapping out a rhythm of disdain. "Tell me," she leaned in close to the CEO, her perfume filling the air, her tone dripping with venom. "How does it feel? To sit among us? To wear your little orange dress and pretend you belong? Did you think no one would notice?" The room held its breath. Every syllable was a strike, every pause an insult. She wanted to break her target not just with wine, but with words, to strip away dignity layer by layer until nothing remained but shame. And then she laughed again, louder, shriller, turning her head toward the crowd. "Don't be shy, everyone. Take a good look. This is what happens when you climb too high." Phones flashed. Glasses clinked. But the energy was thinner now, stretched taut, ready to snap. Even those still laughing felt the unease beneath their own voices, the nagging thought that the joke had gone too far. The CEO remained immovable. Her silence was beginning to feel dangerous, like a storm gathering at the horizon. She did not speak, but her presence said enough. Her gaze followed the heiress with calm precision, tracking her every exaggerated movement as though measuring the cost of each insult. The heiress tried to hold that gaze, but found herself glancing away. She spun again, tossing her hair, twirling her empty glass in circles. She leaned into her role, convinced that performance could erase the tremor of doubt creeping into her chest. "Smile for the cameras," she sneered, lowering her voice just enough for those nearest to hear. "This will be the only headline you'll ever make." Her laughter spilled once more, but it sounded different now, thinner, desperate, fighting against the heavy silence pressing back from the woman she had tried to destroy. And across the table, across the hall, people began to see it. The cruel show was no longer amusing. It was unraveling. The heiress didn't know it yet, but the moment she poured that wine, she had set a fuse, and the woman she mocked was the one holding the match. The laughter spread again, though thinner this time, forced like champagne gone flat. A handful of guests clapped their hands against the table, eager to keep the mood alive, eager to stand on the side of money. Their voices rose in shallow agreement. "That's right," one young man barked from the far end, his cufflinks catching the light as he raised his glass. "Outsiders should know their place." His words drew a ripple of uneasy chuckles. Another, emboldened, leaned back in his chair and spoke louder than he should have. "If she wants to play with giants, she better learn to take a joke." His friends laughed, too loudly, trying to prove they belonged to the same circle of cruelty. The heiress soaked it up. She turned to them, grinning, arms spread wide as if she were conducting the room itself. "See? They understand," she declared, her voice dripping with satisfaction. She basked in the attention, twirling her glass like a scepter. "This is what happens when you forget where you came from." But cracks were forming. Not everyone laughed. At the next table, a woman whispered sharply to her husband, "This is ugly." He cleared his throat and glanced away, unwilling to meet her eyes. At another corner, two investors exchanged looks heavy with unspoken calculations. One murmured, "She's their partner, isn't she?" The other gave the faintest nod. Both fell silent, staring at their plates, unwilling to join the farce. Yet the cruel chorus kept going. Phones hovered higher, recording everything. One guest angled his camera deliberately to frame the CEO's drenched figure, zooming in on the streaks of wine running down her skin. He chuckled to himself, already imagining the captions he would post. "Smile!" someone shouted from across the hall. "Give us a good shot!" A roar of laughter followed, echoing off marble columns, bouncing under the glittering chandelier. The heiress twirled once, her red dress swirling dramatically around her legs. She blew a kiss to the crowd, delighting in the mock applause. "Don't forget this night," she cried, raising her glass high though it was empty. "It's the night an imposter got exposed." She bowed with theatrical exaggeration, reveling in the performance. The loyal ring of guests clapped harder, their laughter rising again, desperate to feed her ego. But the energy was hollow, sustained by habit more than joy. And in the center of it all, the black CEO still sat in silence. Her stillness only magnified the cruelty around her, reflecting every laugh and jeer back on those who gave it voice. One guest noticed. He lowered his phone slowly, slipping it into his pocket, eyes flicking toward the floor. A woman near him stopped laughing mid-breath, covering her mouth as if ashamed of the sound she'd made. The balance was shifting, subtle but undeniable. The heiress, too intoxicated by her own bravado, didn't see it. She bowed again, hair cascading over her shoulders, her laughter high and shrill. "This is who she is," she shouted, pointing dramatically to the soaked woman at the table. "And this is all she'll ever be." The applause answered, but softer this time, scattered, uncertain. The spell was breaking, yet the heiress only smiled wider, blind to the silence growing in the spaces between the laughs. She believed she was winning. She didn't know the floor beneath her was already beginning to crack. The wine dripped slower now, dark stains spreading across the orange fabric, but the black CEO did not move. She sat anchored, as though the chair itself were a throne, and the entire hall had unwillingly become her court. Her silence was not surrender, it was calculation. In her mind, the scene replayed, the signatures scrawled across papers that very morning, the press release drafted but not yet published, the numbers that stretched into billions. 2.4, a partnership celebrated as unshakable. And now, within a single hour, her so-called partner's sister had turned that alliance into a spectacle of humiliation. The heiress laughed again, tossing her hair, clinging to the sound of her own arrogance. "What's wrong?" she mocked, leaning close enough for her perfume to clash with the sour tang of wine. "Cat got your tongue? I thought powerful women always have something to say." The CEO's eyes didn't flicker. She studied her tormentor with unnerving calm, her gaze slow and deliberate. She wasn't looking at the wine. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at the arrogance itself, measuring it, weighing it, deciding its cost. "You think this is power?" Her thoughts whispered in the silence. A glass, a laugh, a crowd eager to clap for cruelty. But real power doesn't need an audience. Real power changes the numbers that built this room, the ink on the contracts your family clings to. The din of voices around her blurred into a dull hum. Every insult, every laugh, every whispered comment merged into a single background noise. All she heard clearly was the echo of her own resolve. She placed one hand flat on the table, steady, firm. The gesture was small, but it commanded attention. A few nearby guests glanced down, sensing a shift but unable to name it. Her other hand moved with equal care, lifting the folded linen napkin from her lap. She dabbed gently at her jaw, removing a line of wine without hurry. Not a gesture of weakness, a gesture of control. The heiress smirked. "Finally, cleaning yourself up, are we?" Her words were loud, meant to be heard. But they stumbled in the air, brittle against the silence that followed the CEO's calm movements. Inside, the decision crystallized. Every insult, every laugh, every drop of wine sliding down her skin was tallied, converted into a calculation. And the sum was clear. 2.4 billion, erased with a word. Her eyes rose once more, meeting the heiress's gaze directly. Not a glare, not even defiance, just certainty. The kind of certainty that unsettled even the most reckless. Across the hall, a few guests shifted uneasily. They couldn't explain it, but they felt it, the storm behind those eyes, the inevitability of consequence. The heiress faltered again, just for a second. She raised her chin higher, trying to smother the doubt with another laugh. But the crack had already appeared, and in the silence between them, the black CEO thought only one thing. Your family believes they poured wine on me. They don't see I'm about to pour billions out of their reach. The napkin slid back onto the table, folded with care, as though the stain upon it meant nothing. The black CEO's hands returned to stillness. Her gaze swept the hall, not hurried, not seeking sympathy, merely observing. Each guest felt the weight of her eyes when it passed over them. Some averted their faces. Others pretended to sip champagne. The air grew dense, fragile, every sound sharp against the silence she commanded. The heiress mistook that quiet for victory. She strutted closer, heels striking the marble with deliberate rhythm. "There it is," she said loudly, turning to the crowd as if delivering a line from a play. The silence of someone who knows she doesn't belong. A few clapped on cue. A nervous ripple of laughter followed. But the CEO remained unbothered. Her stillness was no longer defensive, it was strategic. She reached for her phone, the screen lighting softly in her palm. Her fingers moved with unhurried precision, tapping once, twice. She lifted it to her ear. The shift was immediate. The crowd leaned in, curious. The heiress tilted her head, smirking. "Oh, she's calling for help? Maybe her driver can bring her a towel." Her words were sharp, but her voice was too quick, too eager to fill the space. The CEO's tone, when it came, was nothing like the heiress's theatrics. Calm, cold. Each syllable dropped like iron into the silence. "Terminate the contract," she said. "Effective immediately." A hush fell heavier than before. The hall seemed to contract, the very air pressing inward. Even the string quartet in the corner stumbled, their bows faltering against the strings. Conversations froze mid-whisper. Eyes widened, glances darted. She ended the call without flourish, setting the phone beside her plate as though it were an afterthought. Then she folded her hands once more, posture steady, eyes forward. The heiress blinked, her laugh caught in her throat. "What did she say?" she asked, forcing another chuckle, but it rang hollow. No one answered. The crowd's focus had shifted. They no longer looked at the woman in red. Their eyes clung to the drenched figure at the table, the one who had spoken just 5 words yet shifted the entire room. A man at the far end pulled out his own phone, scrolling frantically, his face drained of color. He nudged his neighbor, whispering urgently. Another guest's screen lit up, displaying an alert from the market. The whispers grew faster, sharper. "She can't mean the deal. Today's deal?" The heiress's smile wavered. She tried to wave her empty glass again, commanding attention. "She's bluffing," she scoffed, but her eyes flickered, betraying doubt. The CEO said nothing more. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any declaration. The weight of what she had just done began to settle across the hall like ash after fire. The heiress laughed once more, too loud, too strained. But fewer people joined in this time. The performance was unraveling, and she was the only one who didn't realize how completely she had lost control. At the center, soaked in wine yet untouchable, the black CEO sat in perfect composure, her silence now a verdict. The seconds stretched long, every eye darting between the woman in orange and the heiress in red. The buzz of whispers grew into a low rumble, words colliding, scattering, rising again. Somewhere near the back, a phone chimed with an alert. Another followed. Then another. The first man to glance at his screen went pale. "Oh my God," he muttered, fingers trembling as he scrolled. "It's real. She's pulling out." His neighbor leaned over, eyes widening at the numbers flashing across the display. One by one, screens lit up around the room. Notifications spread like wildfire. The contract, the investment, the billions suddenly gone. The headlines weren't written yet, but the financial tremors were already shaking the hall. A woman clutched her husband's arm. "She didn't just..." The words trailed off into disbelief. "She did," he whispered, his voice raw. 2.4 billion wiped clean. The quartet had stopped playing altogether. Their bows hung frozen above the strings, waiting for permission to continue that never came. The sound of heels clicking across marble was the only rhythm left, and even that belonged to the heiress pacing, her smile cracking like glass. "She's bluffing," she insisted, voice louder now, desperate. "This is a party trick, a little drama, that's all." Her laugh was high and shrill, but no one echoed it this time. Heads were bent over glowing screens instead. Conversations snapped like sparks. It's gone. Check the market. I just got the same alert. Do you understand what this means? The heiress spun toward the crowd, arms outstretched. Why are you all staring at your phones? She can't do this. My brother, our family, we control this city. But her voice no longer filled the room. It was swallowed by the truth scrolling across every device, by the weight of silence building around the soaked figure who had uttered just 5 words and undone an empire's worth of arrogance. The black CEO reached for her glass, not the empty one wielded like a weapon, but her own, still half full. She lifted it calmly, unshaken hand steady despite the wine dripping down her sleeve. She raised it to her lips, sipped once, then set it back down with quiet grace. No announcement, no explanation, only composure. The hall erupted not with laughter, not with applause, but with a storm of whispers that felt louder than any cheer. Chairs scraped as guests leaned toward one another, frantically piecing together what had just unraveled. Some sat rigid, too stunned to move. Others scribbled notes, already thinking of the boardrooms and headlines waiting outside these gilded doors. The heiress's breathing quickened. She spun back toward the woman she had tried to humiliate, red dress clinging to her as though even the fabric knew the fire had burned out. You think you can scare me with this little game? She demanded, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The CEO finally lifted her eyes again, calm as ever, meeting her tormentor's gaze with the same unflinching steel. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The room itself answered for her, because everyone now understood. This wasn't theater. This was power. The heiress's laughter tried to rise again, brittle and forced, but it broke before it could fill the room. The audience no longer belonged to her. The guests had shifted in their seats, their faces lit with the cold glow of screens, their murmurs sharpened with urgency. No one cared for her theatrics anymore. They cared for numbers, for markets, for the earthquake trembling beneath their fortunes. One man near the head of the table barked into his phone, his voice trembling. Sell, sell now. His words carried like a flare in the night, sparking more calls, more frantic whispers. A woman in silk gripped her clutch so tightly her knuckles whitened. She stared across the table at the drenched figure and whispered, almost to herself, "She really did it." The heiress spun on her heels, her red dress fanning dramatically as if movement alone could pull the spotlight back. "Don't listen to her!" she shouted, but her words rang hollow, swallowed by the rising storm of panic. "She can't! She doesn't have the power, my brother, our family." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They had seen enough. They had heard enough. The silence of the black CEO had spoken louder than her rival's shrill protests. The CEO, still seated, adjusted her posture with effortless grace. She placed her hands flat against the linen, fingers relaxed, eyes scanning the hall as though she were surveying her own domain. The stains on her dress glistened in the light, but they no longer looked like marks of humiliation. They looked like battle scars, like a crown painted in red. One guest dared to speak the truth aloud. "She owns the floor now." His voice was low, but heads nodded in agreement. It was undeniable. The heiress's mask cracked. She turned back toward the CEO, voice trembling beneath the weight of fury. "Do you know who I am?" She spat, her words brittle. "Do you know what family I come from?" The CEO lifted her gaze, unhurried. For the first time, she spoke again. Her tone was calm, clear, cutting through the air like a blade. "I don't need to know who you are. What matters is who you'll be after tonight." The line fell heavy across the banquet hall. Guests exhaled sharply, some gasping, others nodding as though they had been waiting for her to speak. The words were measured, not loud, yet they echoed louder than the heiress's screams. The heiress staggered a step back, clutching her glass tighter, but her eyes betrayed the fear she couldn't hide. She tried to laugh it off, to twirl again, but her movements lacked the confidence of before. The performance was over, and she knew it. Meanwhile, the CEO's silence returned, heavier than before. She had given them only one sentence, yet it was enough to fracture the night into before and after. Around the room, guests whispered furiously, their voices weaving a new narrative, not of humiliation, but of reckoning. The wine on her skin glistened like firelight. The room bowed unconsciously to her presence. And as she sat there, still as stone, the heiress realized something she had never believed possible. Her laughter had lost its power. The red-dressed heiress stood frozen, her chest rising and falling too fast, Her smirk stretched thin across trembling lips. Around her, the banquet no longer resembled a celebration. It was a tribunal, and every eye had turned not toward her, but toward the woman she had tried to drown in wine. The black CEO leaned back slightly in her chair. Not slouched, not weary, reclined, like a queen comfortable on her throne. The wine stains, once meant as ridicule, clung to her dress like medals of defiance. Each drip that touched the marble below echoed louder than the forced laughter of minutes ago. Phones were still raised, but no longer for mockery, guests whispered, recording quietly, their lenses framing the CEO not as a victim but as a force, immortalizing the exact moment the balance of power shifted. One man whispered to his wife, "We're watching history." She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the drenched woman in orange. The heiress tried again, desperate. "You all know my family. You all know my brother. We built this." Her voice cracked, too shrill, too frantic. "She can't erase us." But the room had moved on. A cluster of investors leaned together, their hushed tones carrying across the silence. 2.4 billion, gone in a call. Another shook his head, awe etched into his features. She didn't even raise her voice. The weight of those words settled heavily. Some guests looked at the heiress with pity, others with contempt, but none with the reverence she craved. The CEO lifted her glass again. Slowly, deliberately, she took another sip. The motion was unhurried, a quiet defiance that declared she owned not just her dignity but the room itself. The act was simple, yet it drowned out every protest, every nervous laugh. And then she set the glass down with a soft click against the table. That sound carried more authority than the heiress's shouting. Finally, the CEO spoke, her voice calm, steady, the kind of tone that carried further than any scream. "This room celebrates wealth, power, legacy. But those things aren't inherited in a glass of wine. They're built, earned, protected." Her words slid through the crowd like electricity. Heads tilted forward, listening, absorbing. Phones recorded with renewed urgency. The heiress stiffened, her face flushing red against the glow of the chandeliers. The CEO continued, never raising her volume, yet each word striking harder than the last. "Tonight you tried to humiliate me. But what you've done is remind everyone here that power is not about spectacle, it's about consequence." A silence heavier than marble settled. Guests sat motionless, waiting, watching, unwilling to miss a single breath of what came next. The heiress clutched her empty glass like a shield, her knuckles white, her eyes darting wildly around the room, searching for anyone to rescue her from the silence that had turned against her. But no one moved. All they saw now was the woman seated in orange, drenched but unshaken, her calm presence making the hall itself feel like it had bent to her will. And in that silence it became clear. The heiress wasn't in control anymore. She was standing in the ruins of her own arrogance, while the black CEO sat in the unshakable center of power. The air in the banquet hall felt charged, as if lightning had struck but the thunder had not yet rolled. Guests sat rigid, breaths shallow, their gazes pinned to the woman in orange who had transformed humiliation into dominance. The heiress's red dress shimmered under the chandelier, but its brilliance no longer commanded the room. It clung to her like desperation, the fabric of someone who had lost control. She tried once more, voice trembling as she forced the words out. "This is nonsense. You can't just contract deals. They don't end like that. You think you can walk in here and undo everything my family built?" The CEO's eyes lifted slowly, her stare locked onto the heiress with such calm finality that the younger woman faltered mid-sentence. The crowd leaned in, holding their collective breath. "Power," the CEO said softly, "doesn't ask for permission." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatic, but it landed with a weight that crushed every whisper in the room. The guests froze, their screens glowing faintly in their hands, capturing a sentence that would echo long after the night ended. The heiress's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she looked small, her glass trembling, her laughter gone, her arrogance unraveling. From the far end of the table, an older man in a tailored suit muttered under his breath, "She's finished." Another leaned closer, replying, "No, they're finished. All of them." The murmurs swelled again, but this time they carried a different tone. Not mockery, not scorn, fear, respect, awe. The tide had turned completely, and everyone in the room knew it. The CEO adjusted her posture, wine still dripping faintly from her dress, and rested her chin lightly against her hand. She didn't need to speak further. Her silence was now the verdict, her composure the sentence. The heiress stumbled a step back, her heels catching against the marble. She looked around frantically for support for the friends who had laughed with her, for the allies who had clapped at her cruelty. But their eyes refused to meet hers. They were busy looking at the woman she had tried to shame, the woman who had instead revealed herself as untouchable. Even the quartet, frozen in the corner, seemed to be waiting on the CEO's unspoken command to resume. The entire hall had realigned around her presence. The heiress finally slammed her glass down on a side table, the crystal cracking with the force. "This isn't over," she hissed, though her voice shook too much to be convincing. She spun away, her red dress swirling like fire, losing oxygen, and stormed toward the exit. But her departure was not a triumph. It was a retreat. The CEO did not rise. She didn't need to. She simply watched, eyes steady, until the doors closed behind the woman in red. The silence that followed was thick, absolute. And then, slowly, the whispers began again, not about scandal, but about legacy, about power, about the billions shifted with a single phone call, about the woman who had endured humiliation yet walked away as the only name that mattered. In that moment, the hall itself seemed to bow not to wealth inherited, but to strength earned. The doors shut with a hollow thud, and the echo lingered like the last note of a requiem. The heiress was gone, but the weight of her arrogance still hung in the air, now stripped bare for all to see. What had begun as spectacle ended as silence, silence that belonged entirely to the woman still seated at the center of the hall. The black CEO lifted her glass one final time. The chandelier's glow danced across its rim, and for a heartbeat the crowd saw not the stains on her dress, not the wine dripping faintly to the marble, but the poise of a leader who had turned mockery into mastery. She took a slow sip, set the glass down with deliberate grace, and looked around the room. One by one, eyes dropped before hers. Phones lowered, whispers died. No one dared laugh now. No one dared sneer. The guests who had joined in the cruelty earlier sat rigid, shame pooling in their silence. Others, those who had watched with unease, now leaned forward with respect they could not disguise. She spoke, her voice steady, low, carrying with ease through the hall. Dignity doesn't vanish when wine is poured. It doesn't shatter under laughter. Dignity endures. And tonight, every person in this room learned who truly holds it. The words settled like stone, immovable, undeniable. A murmur spread this time, not mockery, not panic, but acknowledgement. Investors exchanged glances heavy with calculation. A woman at the far end whispered to her companion, "She owns the room. She owns the future." The reply came as a nod, grim and certain, "And she owns the deal that's now gone." The CEO rose at last. The movement was slow, unhurried, yet it rippled through the hall like thunder. The stains on her dress glistened under the light, but they no longer looked like shame. They looked like proof that even drenched in cruelty, she stood untouchable. Chairs scraped as some guests instinctively rose with her, unsure whether it was respect or fear that moved them. The quartet, still silent, lowered their bows altogether, sensing the night had passed beyond music. She turned toward the exit, her steps measured, each one echoing in the silence. No one blocked her way, no one dared. As she passed, the sea of guests shifted, parting like subjects before their sovereign. Just before the door, she paused. She looked back once, not at the empty space where the heiress had stood, not at the shattered glass left behind, but at the crowd itself. Her gaze swept over them, calm and resolute. "Power doesn't come from spectacle," she said. "It comes from what happens after." And with that, she stepped through the doors, leaving behind a hall drenched not in laughter, but in awe. The guests sat frozen in her wake. The whispers would come later on the trading floor, in boardrooms, in the press. But for now, the silence said it all. She had entered the evening as a guest. She left it as the only name that mattered. And somewhere beyond those doors, the empire she had just dismantled began to crumble.